A Hindu law student was bullied, tortured, harassed in Hyderabad, India after his private chats with a girl named Dipasha Sharma, allegedly against a religious figure, were publicly disseminated by the girl in his college. The boy was brutally beaten up, shamed, sexually assaulted by a gang of ruffian boys who said they would fix his ideology. We try to understand more about this incident and so many other things from Hindu human rights activist and MD of Foundation Atma, Rashmi Samant. Namaste, Rashmi ji. Welcome to the show.
Namaste, Shreya ji. Thank you so much for having me and having this very important conversation today.
So, Rashmi ji, can you begin by telling us what exactly is this case about? What exactly has transpired in Hyderabad in the law college?
Well, as I see it, I see a very young boy who's being isolated, targeted, and bullied for reasons which are hyperbolically manipulated to spark communal tensions. Here, it was just a young boy having a personal chat with one of his peers, and his privacy being breached. Screenshots of that particular conversation, maybe part of it being circulated around, his privacy being breached, his confidentiality being breached, his thoughts being put out there, uh, in a way to fit pre-existing narratives that can then vilify and create an unsafe environment for him on campus, which it has. And I think somewhere deep down I too relate to it in some ways, because not too long ago something similar happened to me. Maybe the circumstances were very different, and and things are very different, but the way in which narratives get twisted, to harass and vilify Hindus, that remains the same. The underline is the same. The whole underlying intention, the malice, remains the same. It is to target Hindus, it is to target young Hindus and shake their self confidence so much in a place that is supposed to be an altar of learning and growing, that it becomes very difficult for them then to come back to society, to to be productive, and to and to contribute as a leader in society. I see an attack on the core self confidence of a young Hindu boy, and a lifetime of trauma possibly if he doesn't get the justice at this point.
Absolutely, Rashmi ji. And the fact that this has happened in a law college, a law school, that's even more alarming. That somebody could just orchestrate and strategize, plan this whole attack, take some time, because according to the complaint that this boy has written to the police, on which the police has even gone on to lodge an FIR under various sections of the Indian Penal Code, it is seen that the incident has taken place in a very, very planned manner, 2 days or 3 days after the original, the comments were shared by him with the girl in question. So I want to know, Rashmi ji, that there is a rising trend of intolerance against any comments allegedly made against religious figures. But how this plays out for different communities, that's not the same. While some choose a peaceful method to protest, others pick up arms and choose violence. Such clips are then also published on social media. Do you think that this is some kind of signaling? Yeah.
Well, I think we all have a fundamental right to free speech, debate, within a democratic and secular nation, as long as our intentions are in the right place. And also, the country in question here, India, it's got laws and regulations in place to ensure justice to all concerned parties. So everyone has got sufficient avenues to address their problems, to address their queries, to address the issues they're having. But this kind of resort, taking to violence, taking to bullying, taking to harassment, he was just not beaten up, he was just not sexually assaulted, he was even robbed. And I mean, they shoved powder inside his mouth. And I read the letter. He writes that for the past 2 3 days, I haven't been able to eat properly, I haven't been able to swallow because of the problem that the powder has been, that they shoved down my throat is causing. The poor boy has been choking partially for the past 2 3 days. He writes that as I struggle to breathe as I write this letter of complaint. That is the level to which his being, his, his authority, his being, his rights as a citizen of India are being questioned. I mean, he's just not, he's not even in a proper condition to file that complaint. That is what he's being reduced to. Whilst, certain similar issues, similar problems, similar controversies which have erupted in maybe other quarters, in other religious communities, they've had a very peaceful dialogue. There's always been the lodging of an FIR, followed by a proper investigation, a judgment. And the religious communities in the past have respected the law of the land and the judgment, and whatever whatever punishment the law enforcement authorities deem fit. Communities have never taken law unto their own hands. But we see a diverging trend when it comes to certain communities, and there is no sort of uniformity in adhering to laws. There is no uniformity in adhering and accepting judgments, and that, I think, is the single biggest threat to the Indian democracy. When everybody, not all players, not all people on the table want to play by the same rules, then it becomes a huge source of conflict for communities, especially a community as diverse as the community that lives in India. We have, a very diverse country, and we've lived so beautifully, and I think diversity has been one of our biggest strengths. You see so many different people doing so many different things, but it can only last as long as we all choose to say play by the same rules, we all choose to adhere to the same laws. Even if one community chooses to disrespect that, take law in their own hands, then it becomes a problem to everybody, and then it becomes a point of injustice for everybody, and there is no telling where this kind of spiral will end, how it will end. And yeah, that I feel is a very dangerous thing that India needs to address on war footing. It is something that the Indian citizens need to be aware of, everybody, that this is how things are going. And I think you raised a very good point about the incident happening in a law school. These students are supposed to then go on and defend the Indian constitution. But if they have no respect whatsoever to laws, to regulations, to natural course of justice, then I wonder what kind of lawyers they're going to be, what kind of lawyers they're going to end up being, or what this kind of education is going to take them towards, because they're clearly not choosing to apply or adhere to the very lessons they've been learning in that institution.
Right, Rashmi ji, there is also the point that, the boy has stated in his complaint that this was in fact comment which was made in a private chat. So there is also the question of his right to privacy being violated. In fact, what I also want to ask you is that, do you see any parallels in terms of intolerance against race which you faced in the UK, and instances of intolerance based on religion that are becoming more common in India? Are there any parallels there in terms of the mere the sheer magnitude of the intolerance at every level?
Well, I think I see a pattern of intolerance globally. There are communities which choose to work hard, play by the rules, and integrate with their host community, whilst retaining their sense of being, basically not being a nuisance anywhere. And then they end up getting bullied everywhere. The Hindus in New Jersey, they were called the dot heads, they were targeted, their heads were smashed. And this was not even recent times, this was the 70s. In the 70s. And then you have the very incident that happened to me. I was elected president, rightfully so. And then what happened was, it wasn't justice, it wasn't fair, that I got targeted for aspects of my personal life, which are very which is very private to me, which is not out there, and it's not something for everybody to take a go at. This is also happening in India. I think it has not got to do anything with geography or times that we live in. It's basically communities which have an inherent um, urge to integrate, and those that don't, and then those who are willing to play by the rules often end up getting bullied.
So, Rashmi ji, what I want to know is that a case has been registered in Hyderabad against the culprits and they've also been arrested. All the accused are in custody. But where do you see this heading in terms of legal proceedings?
Well, in terms of legal proceedings, I don't think we can say much as of now. We'd have to wait and watch, because even in the past, things have gone very south after the initial few steps being taken up hastily. Um, but I mean, I'm happy that at least we didn't have to create massive nationwide outrage for even as much as an FIR to be registered. I'm happy that it happened without much outrage, that it happened quickly, and that it was not reduced to a mere bullying case, because this is not a mere bullying case. Bullying is bad, trust me. I would have wanted proper legal action for bullying on campus, as well as formerly elected heads of two different institutions, educational institutions and their student unions. I would want to tackle bullying with equal severity, and this is something I've done previously. But I can clearly see that this is not just bullying. It is not some senior trying to rag a junior. This is way beyond that. His core has been shattered through the series of events. This is not just a plain simple case. He was sexually assaulted. That is a whole different other avenue. There has been dragging. And thirdly, his entire identity, his religious identity has been deeply attacked, because being forced to do something, or adhere to a religion that you were not born into, and you do not ascribe to or subscribe to, is a very serious psychological um, attack, because you you position your entire life, your entire worldview based on what you follow, and to be forced to say otherwise, and to be forced to think otherwise, is deeply traumatizing. I think it is a human rights violation that that the world has not come truly to terms with, for multiple different reasons. You see this every day. You see these reports coming in every day, from Pakistan or Bangladesh, where little girls are forced into marriages with people of other religion, just for the sake of religious conversion. And here you have a boy being beaten down, sexually assaulted, robbed, and even like physically attacked with, I think, powder. I don't know what powder, but a powder that's clearly had him choking. and unable to swallow for a clear week or more, uh, for the sake of ascribing to a religion that he clearly does not identify with. And I think this is a much deeper crime, and a much, serious crime than just bullying or just ragging. And I mean, I'm not saying that ragging and bullying are just as small, but this is something much, much, much deeper and needs to be tackled with that kind of rigor. By looking at the provisions under which the assaulters and the perpetrators of the crime have been charged, it does look like the police is serious about getting to the very root of the crime. I just hope that they don't lose that tenacity, owing to pressure or owing to different kinds of I don't know, like associated this thing that comes from lobbies, because we clearly know what goes on in Hyderabad, what the political climate there is. And it wasn't long ago that in Hyderabad, many rioting youth were let off because the MP, the honorable MP for Hyderabad, lobbied for them. So I just hope that this doesn't turn into that. And with all due respect to the court, the constitution, and judicial proceedings, including the police, I just hope that this does not relapse into certain incidents that we're very privy to in the past.
Correct. Rashmi ji, I want to ask you this, that it is said that across the world it's being said that by the media that rising instances of majoritarian intolerance are being seen in India, whereas the recent trend that we have seen, the cases that have come up, even in this particular case, you can find the boys saying that they're trying to beat him up. Firstly, they're beating him up, and then they're saying they're going to fix his ideology. What are your views on this wholly ironical situation, which is visible and compared to what is being portrayed in the media?
Shreyaji, let me just give you the facts, and I think you can then decide for yourself what the problem is. In the 70s, the Hindus were attacked in New Jersey. They were called dot heads, their heads were smashed. Recently, in Leicester, Hindus were attacked, their homes were ransacked. There's also a Henry Jackson Society report which clearly says that the Hindus were not at fault for the violence that was unleashed upon them. Then we have India. I think the most recent example is that of the boy we're speaking about, where he was assaulted and he was beaten up to pulp. We have neighboring countries. We have Pakistan. We have Bangladesh. We know the state of Hindus there. So, do you see a majoritarianism trend, or do you see a rather Hindus being targeted worldwide for just choosing to play by rules, for choosing to integrate, and for choosing to be law abiding citizens? So I think this is a trend that we really need to understand, instead of hypothecating or trying to impose Western definitions. I mean, majoritarianism, sure. Fascism, sure. But it's not happening in India. And just because one religion or community holds a numerical majority, that does not mean that you then vilify their culture, their patience, their morals, based on accepted Western definitions for when a community becomes a numerical majority, because Hindus have never been that way. Hindus have never been expansionists. We have never led crusades to conquer the world and to convert people by force, or by fire. We've never done that historically. You can look at history. Even today, despite being a numeric majority, we chose to be a country where we give equal rights to other religions as well, irrespective of whether what they've done to us and our ancestors. Because let's face it, um, the colonial period and the Mughal era was not easy on Hindus. It was one of the most horrific periods of time for Hindus. Despite that, when we got to a place where we had a say in the political climate, we chose to give equal rights to everybody. So I think it's unfair to impose accepted definitions of majoritarianism or fascism or anything for that matter on Hindus, because Hindu culture does not propone these things. Dharma doesn't propone these things. And I'm not saying this out of thin air. You can look at facts, you can look at history, you can actually go back in time, because we are, after all, the oldest, surviving indigenous culture out there. So we were there before Christianity, we were there before Islam, and there is proper documented history of what we were up to when we were there. So I think time, history, everything speaks for our nature and for the way we've been. And I don't think we can say the same thing about other communities. So maybe if a certain community, religious community, becomes a majority numerically, maybe they do resort to majoritarianism, maybe they do resort to fascism. But I think it is wholly dependent on the very fundamental nature of the community, and Hindus are not that way. I'm sorry. You got to come up with better facts if you want to just label, mislabel, and hogwash the rich history and the decency that we've had to other people and communities over time.
Thank you, Rashmi ji. Would you like to enlighten us on whether, what your experience has been about whether authorities respond differently to complaints from members of different communities, both over
Well, I
here in India and then?
well, I think I am living example of how there is institutional bias, and unfortunately, it does exist. I was raised thinking of everything from a black and white perspective: just, unjust, right and wrong, always do the right thing in every situation. That was how I was raised, and I think coming from there, to be suddenly confronted with institutional bias was not easy. But because I have, let me tell you one thing: it's not hubris; it's real. Institutional bias unfortunately exists, and action is directly proportional to lobbying, to media pressure, to external pressure. It is not driven by a sense of what is right and wrong. And unfortunately, this is what we have come to as a global community. This happened to me while I was in the UK. A lot of the investigation was basically propelled by the external pressure, be it through media, be it through political hierarchy, be it through activists. That's unfortunately what ultimately pushes an institution to deliver justice or not. And I think in the case of the student we're speaking about, it's all going to depend on how much the Hindu community can mobilize to seek justice for him. We're not asking for something unfair. We're not lobbying to let the perpetrators go free. That's never been the agenda of the Hindu community. Every time we've seen somebody commit um something wrong within our own community, we've been the first people to disown them, even before other communities come forward to blame or anything. We've been the first people to disown our own whenever they're in the wrong. So going by that, I think the least we are doing here is asking for justice. And justice here is going to be entirely dependent on how much media pressure, how much societal pressure, and how much political pressure comes in on getting this across. And for justice to be done, we're not asking for anything wrong, but I think it could come across as mildly wrong when I'm when I'm asking the community to come out in full support. But unfortunately, mob justice is how society globally unfortunately works. Media, uh, approval from all quarters becomes extremely necessary, and especially in situations where things are so biased. It is biased because unfortunately the globe has become conditioned to external pressure rather than their central sense of righteousness and the moral compass that they should have, which I think all dharmics do have, but can't say so much about non-dharmics. So I think unfortunately living in this kind of a situation, that is what it has come down to.
Correct. When you talk about mob justice, you surely mean that how the masses have to be peacefully mobilized, like in the case that happened in Leicester. The Hindus did mobilize themselves, but it was always a peaceful protest. They did speak up against the incidents that happened over there, but it was always carried out peacefully. And even in the arrests that were made following the Leicester violence, there were hardly any Hindus arrested or found to have engaged in violence. Uh, you're over there in the UK right now, on your investigative trip. I want to know from you, what exactly have you observed and what have you discovered about the whole Leicester violence?
Well, I think there have been quite a few interesting revelations. You were right to point out that the Hindus have been extremely respectful and extremely peaceful in their in their pursuit of justice. I mean, I could clearly see when the mandir was attacked. So the Shivalaya Mandir in Leicester, that was the one that was attacked. Flags were burned down. People were climbing up on the it was a murderous mob trying to literally ransack and desecrate the whole place, and the police was just standing there. You can clearly see it in the video. The police was just standing around doing nothing. And I mean, you got to give it to the Hindus, the sense of dharma that our people have, the sense of righteousness that our people have. That is the only thing that stops us from not doing the wrong thing. That is the only thing that stops us from being peaceful in our pursuit of justice. That is the only thing that stops us from sinning, in the pursuit of justice. And you can also clearly see it in the Kashmiri Pandits. They have been through hell and back, and they still do, because the killings have not stopped, irrespective of what the media or anybody else tries to tell you. But their sense of righteousness in their pursuit of justice, their sense of peace and calm, even in the face of such mounting disparity and sorrow, is commendable. So I saw that spirit when I was in Leicester, that spirit of dharma, that commitment to dharma, that commitment to righteousness, and that commitment to staying on the right path, but resisting the wrong. Even in Bhagavad Gita, I think Krishna tells Arjuna that, in the face of injustice, you have to resist. Being a dharmic doesn't mean that you take everything lying down, but there is a proper time that, and there is a proper way to pursue that justice. And I saw that in the Hindus of Leicester. I saw them with that spirit. I mean, they have picked up, they are doing the right thing, and they're still pushing for the right thing. They're still pushing for the for the wrongdoers to be prosecuted. They're still pushing to having their evidence heard in the proper channels. They're still pushing for justice to be done. And these are all Hindus, with no criminal record whatsoever. They have never been to jail. There's never been a day when they've, walked on the wrong side of the street. And they are the ones who were wronged at this point. And the people on the other side, I can't say as much. There's a serial record against them. They've been in and out of jail consistently. None of them are gainfully employed. Can you imagine the people who went up against the Hindus in Leicester? At least 60% of them are unemployed and have been in and out of jail frequently in the past couple of months and years. And when you see this clear distinction factually, you can clearly see what the matter is. You can clearly see who has intention of malice, who has the means to put it together, who has the means to execute it. Because I think crime is organized, it is not spontaneous. As much as we'd like to brand it as spontaneous to decriminalize it, I think branding any criminal activity as spontaneous is just decriminalizing it. Just saying it was spur of the moment, the person couldn't, handle their emotions. Sorry, that is not how criminal psychology works. Crime is organized. And if people come out saying that it all happened in the spur of the moment, they're clearly trying to protect the perpetrators by saying that. You can see in the whole Kashmir narrative, there's this whole hue and cry about how the communities were wronged, and that's why they've resorted to terrorism. Sorry, do you see the Kashmiri pundits, the Hindus, do the same thing? No, they haven't resorted to violence. No, they haven't resorted to anything. In fact, even when they see their own kith and kin being killed, they don't riot out or resort to mass terrorism. Sure, they do resist, but only there. But they do not spontaneously go out and blow themselves up in the middle of the street, killing innocents who have nothing to do with what happened to them. But then when you try to brand these acts of terrorism as spontaneity or, in the emotions, you're clearly, trying to whitewash the intention of the perpetrator, because it takes organizing to execute something of the level of Leicester. Because you can clearly see it in the timeline. They tried to totally paint it as a India Pakistan match gone bad. No, India Pakistan match gone bad does not result in a temple being desecrated a few days after. The match was somewhere end of August, I think 28th of August. But what happens is, early September, first week, end of first week of September, that a temple is being desecrated. This is organized crime. This is terrorism. This is what I saw. And clearly, all the narratives that were coming out as a Pakistan India match, spur of the moment thing, was clearly trying to dehumanize, decriminalize, and rob the victims of their very basic human rights.
Correct. Rashmi ji, also like extending this discussion further and coming back to the main case at hand. You can see even here in the case of this little boy who's been attacked, that even in his case, it was in fact a very well planned out and strategized thing. I'm going to read out from his complaint here. I have a copy of the complaint and I'm just going to take us through that. It says that he had sent this particular girl, Dipasha Sharma, the private text on October 14th, and she distributed the screenshot of the same on November 2nd, despite knowing that I would be killed, he says. And then he has said that after the Pasha, he has also held somebody else accountable, saying that that person made the situation worse by locking him in his room while those folks were made to all come inside. And then that person was in fact given, these people were given belts made of leather. That's what he was attacked with. And they all then ganged up against him after locking him inside his room and then perpetrating whatever crimes they did upon him. So it was a very, very well planned out, thought out, strategized attack, I would say, on this little boy. Despite that, like you pointed out,
Shared,
yeah,
if I might just add, we live in times when it's impossible to get three friends to dinner at the same time, because everybody's so busy doing their own thing. They've got exams, they've got deadlines to meet. But here you see a couple of boys come together at the same particular time with weapons. We live in times where we forget our keys and our phones. But they all come with weapons that clearly have the potential to cause damage. They come with powder with the clear intention of choking him. I think it requires a lot of forethought, a lot of procuring, because I don't think choking powder is available, on the go. You have to actually look for it with the intention of choking somebody and then carry it. It's not something that that's lying around in the pocket, or that's lying around in your jeans. It's just not something that's just lying around. And had it been a spur of the moment thing, the doors would have been open. Things have been a lot more messier. So you can clearly make a distinction of that to the times that we live in. It's rather ironic that in times where we forget our keys, our phones, can't bring friends, more than two friends together at the same time at a particular place for a dinner or a catch up, that these things, like a gang of boys with the intention of hitting someone with the right weapons at the same time at the same place, coming together, and that being whitewashed as a few boys ganged up and spur of the moment thing. Can you see it? I mean, can you clearly see the distinction of the times that we live in, and you know the hypocrisy of people just trying to paint this as unorganized, spur of the moment, senior junior banter thing? No, this just doesn't just happen that way, because these things are not just lying around. People are not lying around. We just have so much going on in our personal lives, and there has to be specific intention, there has to be specific effort that goes into organizing it. And you can clearly see that. You just have to dig deeper and not fall into you just have to think for yourself, in my opinion. Not even dig deeper, you have to think for yourself instead of accepting downloads of pre-existing narratives. Because even sometimes I do accept these things when somebody says, oh, senior junior banter. But then when I think for myself, hold on, then all these things start making sense. Then all these things start to
Add up.
then you clearly see the intention.
Yeah. Yeah. And also the fact that, in fact, when they were leaving, they go on to say that they're going to dispose of his body in case he talks about this with anybody. That's a very, very serious allegation which has been put out in his complaint. Moving on, Rashmi ji, what I want to know is that, so Professor Salvatore Bobon, who, by the own admission of some journalists in the media, is not even very well known, but he's been facing a barrage of comebacks and criticisms from certain sections of the media who have come down upon him for an article that he wrote titled Indian Democracy at 75. Who are the barbarians at the gate? Can you tell us what this article is about, and what is he facing? What is Professor Babon facing, and why?
I think what basically the professor is facing is repercussions for speaking the truth in a supposedly free society. The people masquerading under banners of freedom, of free speech, and open discussions actually don't like what he's saying, and that's why they're personally attacking him, barraging him, to to create a dent in his psychology, and to affect him in ways that are that are much deeper, to stop him from speaking out. When I became president and I was set out on doing things, that's what they did. They bullied me, they harassed me, they started speaking about my parents, about how I looked, and that's what they do. They deflect, they personally attack, they try to make up things to discredit you, because they know what you're saying is right, because what you're saying, it makes sense, and because what you're saying is influencing people. They clearly see the threat that what he's saying, his articles, his work, is influencing people, it's moving people, it's forcing them to think in ways that that they wouldn't previously. It's forcing them to simply stop downloading pre-existing narratives. you know I think that is why they see him as a threat. That is why the lobby sees him as a threat, because they rely on people just downloading narratives as is, playing along with it, and just uh, going in that particular direction. They just rely on being herders of sheep. And because of people like the professor and others out there, people are refusing to be sheep and being herded by senseless people. They're refusing to have their own minds. They're refusing to make their own decisions and come to their own conclusions, which in turn means that they do not, ascribe to preset agendas or propaganda, and that becomes a threat. So all these personal attacks start. So I think that is about it, clear as day. They don't like what he's saying, and they're scared that he's making quite the impact out there.
Correct. And although it seems like a redundant question, but I want to know your views on what this whole thing going on in international media is about, that India is turning into an electoral autocracy. What do you think about that? What do you have to say to these people?
Well, I think India is the largest democracy out there, and the Indians have clearly chosen their mandate. And just because the people out there don't like it, they don't have the right to vilify the Indian voters for it. Just because we refuse to spend our every living breath out there shouting our political ideology doesn't mean that we have one and that we strongly ascribe to it. As I said, I think a lot of the sensible people actually do constructive work. They are gainfully employed. They contribute to the nation's GDP. They contribute to the nation's growth. So they don't have the time to go out on the streets and shout out about their ideology day in and day out. Sure, it may look like the unemployed ruffians and rabble rousers are the only one shouting out their ideology, but that doesn't mean that everybody resonates with that. So I think the views of a minority shouldn't be imposed upon the majority just because the minority doesn't have anything better to do at this point. I mean, I'm being brutal about this, but I think that is the truth. Let's face it.
Correct. Also, talking about freedom of speech, do you think that the case that has happened in Hyderabad, it needs to be distinguished from, say, your regular hate speech? Even the Supreme Court of India has come down very heavily upon, scenes of hate speeches being publicly made. But in this case, it was a private comment made in a private chat. Do you think that is something which needs to be highlighted and needs to be taken care of while dealing with this case? And also, what do you think are the rights, or where are the lines to be drawn when we talk about what comments I can pass about any authority, any figure, religious, political, or otherwise, while talking with, say, just a friend? It's a private chat, right? So what are your views on that? Where are the lines to be drawn?
I think the line has to be drawn at intention. Whether the individual in question had the intention to cause a riot or not, whether the individual in question had the intention to create communal disharmony or not. That's where the line has to be drawn. I think that is what matters by the end of the day. We all have our ideas, we all have our philosophies, but by the end of the day we are all humans, with our human rights, trying to live a decent life and make a decent earning out there. I think that's where the line has to be drawn. The child clearly was having a personal conversation. He wasn't trying to incite something or go out there and change someone's mind about anything. So I think there are some, you can't just micro analyze situations, but really look at what the intention deep down was. And I think that should set the tone for all judgments when it comes to hate speech. And I think the hate speech laws in India are written wonderfully. They exclude certain facets, certain facts from being classified. So, and then there is also an emphasis on on intention. But I think it comes down to interpretation by the lawyers. It comes down to the judges, and it also comes down to the evidence that is available. So I think it's quite complicated, and there is more discussion and deliberation that has to be had. But unfortunately, the atmosphere of fear uh, for life stops from certain honest conversations from being had, for there to be, um, certain gainful advancements with respect to free speech.
Right. Coming back to how they basically now, in recent times, there seems to be a well thought out plot to target infrastructural projects completed during the NDA government and launched by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. There was a recent incident where the Udaipur Ahmedabad, the new railway track, was tried to be blown up. And there have been many such instances. Would you like to enlighten us more about this pattern?
Well, as a taxpayer, I see this as an act of terrorism and as an act of, robbery of, the money that every honest citizen pays towards public infrastructure. So, irrespective of what, who, or what the intention was, I clearly see vandalism of public infrastructure as an act of crime, and that the individuals perpetrating them should be prosecuted for the same, and that, recovery notices should be sent to them to recover part, or whatever is possible of the damages that they've caused to the collective blood, sweat, and tears of the citizens of the country. That is something that I honestly believe. Because by the end of the day, we are just trying to build a beautiful nation that is prosperous and that has opportunities for everybody. And public infrastructure is key in that journey, and it is something that is going to stay with us for a really long time, and nobody has the right to, attack the possibilities and the future of, fellow citizens. It is just not possible, because you can't take away basic things from others, or the efforts that they've put in to make that happen, to put that, it's been an intergenerational effort to amass that kind of money, that wealth, to be able to put together such wonderful infrastructure together. You don't like the government, you protest about it. You don't like the government, you write about it, you speak about it, you go on as many channels as possible. If they deplatform you, you go, on your own channels, you create your own YouTube channel, you go on and on and on about it. But you don't get to take away others' dreams and others' work and others' blood, sweat, and tears, literally, to make a point. That is just anarchy. That is just anarchy, and you're trying to, masquerade and decriminalize anarchy by portraying it as some kind of defiance to government. I think it's just basically terrorism. Trying to blow up a track is an act of terrorism, because lives are going to be lost, money is going to be lost, and public infrastructure is going to be lost. And that is not defiance of government. That is disrespect and an act of criminality, and an intention of criminality towards other fellow human beings. And that should be treated just as.
Correct. Which, extending this same point, I also want to know your views on how do you think the Modi government, which is criticized so much, globally criticized, how do you think it's faring or has fared so far in upholding India's democratic flag?
Well, I think the people who are talked about the most, the people who are criticized the most, are the ones who are putting the most effort and the ones who are having the most success in the process, right? You don't have anything to talk about people who are not making any efforts at all. So I think that is a positive sign that progress is being made, and that we are heading in a good direction, because uh, by the end of the day, the global scenario is just a competition between different countries for supremacy in terms of, firepower, economy, in terms of stature, in terms of privileges, in terms of, say, everything, the show and the force. So clearly, when somebody who was previously back is coming front, you try to put in everything that you've got to stop that from happening, and that's what's happening, I guess. The West clearly doesn't like that there's new competition, and that they're clearly making a lot of headway. So they're going to try everything, every trick up their sleeve to fuel, to create circumstances which are going to be counterproductive to us. But I think we need to know what is good for us and what future we want to set for ourselves, whether we want to still be left standing with a begging bowl asking for grants from the World Bank every now and then, or we want to be the ones sending out aid and relief to other countries. We clearly have to make that distinction for ourselves and pick a government that enables either. So either we pick a government that reduces us to a begging bowl, or we pick a government that then sends relief to countries abroad, far and wide, in their times of peril. So I think these are the markers, and the success is subjective. If you wanted us to be a beggar, then clearly we are not succeeding. But if you wanted us to be in it, up there, top there, shining, then it is success. I think it's very subjective. Success is very subjective to what your intention is.
Absolutely. What a wonderful way to summarize the whole conversation. That contrary to whatever is being said about India, about the Modi government, about India turning into an electoral autocracy, it's actually a very, very subjective discussion. And of course, the people who are saying this, they have their own ulterior motives for terming incidents in India a certain way, even though facts actually show otherwise. Even about Hindus, not just about India, facts clearly show otherwise, that Hindus have resorted to speaking up against whatever atrocities are being committed against them, but they've always done it in a legal manner. you know they've not taken up arms, and this is shown through, this is evident. It just speaks for itself. So I thank you so much, G, for joining us today, taking time out, and what a lovely discussion. Thank you, thank you.
Pleasure is all mine, Shreya ji. Thank you so much for having me.
Namaste.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.